In America's Great Basin, where the Wasatch Mountains rise to the east and the Great Salt Lake stretches out to the northwest, lies a valley whose dry land and limited water supply once seemed like insurmountable obstacles, yet it became a place that would change the course of American history. This is the Salt Lake Valley, a land that for centuries was home to the Ute, Paiute, Shoshone, and Gushoot peoples, who developed ways of hunting, gathering, and seasonal movement perfectly suited to this arid and unforgiving environment. These communities understood the land deeply, moving with the seasons and adapting to what little water the basin offered. But large-scale farming would only become possible once that water could be systematically channeled to the fields through organized irrigation. In the 19th century, this region remained far removed from America's major cities and transportation routes, isolated by mountains and desert alike, and the Great Basin was widely regarded as one of the harshest challenges facing migrants traveling west during the era of American expansion. Everything changed in 1847, when followers of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, having left their settlement of Nauvoo, Illinois, entered this valley in search of a place they could finally call home. Their journey had not been easy. They had been forcibly expelled from Nauvoo in 1846, and years of hardship, conflict, and displacement had brought them across a continent to this remote and unfamiliar land. Brigham Young, president of the church, led the first pioneer company that reached the valley in July 1847, and July 24, 1847, became a date forever remembered and celebrated in Utah's history. As soon as the settlers arrived, they began surveying the surrounding land, checking the soil for fertility, searching for reliable sources of water, and identifying locations suitable for permanent construction and settlement. Within days, the settlers began digging channels to divert water from the nearby mountain streams to their fields, and agriculture quickly became the very foundation of this new settlement, because in such an isolated and unforgiving region, producing enough food was quite literally a matter of survival. The settlement was initially known as Great Salt Lake City, a name that would later be shortened simply to Salt Lake City. The city itself was laid out on a carefully organized grid system, with wide streets, large city blocks, and generous space for farming woven directly between homes and public buildings, a design that reflected both practical necessity in a harsh climate and the religious planning principles held by its founders. But 1848 proved to be far from an easy year for the fledgling community. Harvests were poor, supplies ran short, and conditions grew increasingly harsh. The winter of 1847 to 1848 tested the settlers severely, since provisions were already dangerously low after the long overland migration, and the steady arrival of additional settlers only increased the pressure on an already strained food supply. That same difficult year, large swarms of crickets descended upon the young crops, threatening to destroy what little the settlers had managed to grow. Historical accounts describe the settlers' desperate and exhausting efforts to save their fields from ruin, followed by the sudden arrival of flocks of birds that helped dramatically reduce the cricket threat. This event became a deeply important part of local historical memory in Utah, though historians today still debate many of its exact details and the extent of its impact. That same year, through the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, following the conclusion of the Mexican-American War, the United States formally gained control of the region, the very land that would later become known as Utah Territory. This major political shift placed the young Salt Lake settlement within an entirely new American governmental framework. In 1849, local leaders attempted to organize what they called the State of Deseret, seeking a measure of self-governance ahead of any formal federal territorial status, and this ambitious proposed territory was far larger in size than present-day Utah. However, the United States government ultimately declined to recognize Deseret as a state, and in 1850, it established Utah Territory instead. Brigham Young subsequently became Utah's first territorial governor, and Salt Lake City firmly became the administrative center of the territory, as well as the enduring headquarters of church leadership. In the early 1850s, organized migration continued to bring wave after wave of new settlers into the valley, and the city steadily grew into a regional hub for trade, communication, and religious administration across the entire Great Basin. The local economy relied heavily on farming, livestock, and ongoing exchange with newly arrived migrants passing through. And since imported goods from the east were expensive and often difficult to obtain, residents increasingly began producing what they needed for themselves, including clothing, tools, and other essential household goods. In 1851, the Utah Territorial Legislature officially incorporated Great Salt Lake City, establishing a formal municipal government to oversee local affairs. Yet political authority in the territory remained closely and controversially tied to church leadership, a reality that raised growing concerns among federal officials in Washington. And throughout the 1850s, national debate intensified over precisely how Utah should be governed. In 1857, these long-simmering tensions finally escalated into what became known as the Utah War, when President James Buchanan made the decision to send federal troops to Utah, following alarming reports of resistance from territorial leaders. The subsequent advance of the United States Army created a serious political crisis, though it ultimately never erupted into full-scale war between the two sides. In 1858, the crisis was resolved through careful negotiation, as Brigham Young was formally replaced as governor by federal appointee Alfred Cumming. This entire episode vividly illustrated the deepening conflict between local self-rule and centralized federal authority in the American West. Even after this crisis subsided, Salt Lake City continued to grow steadily in size and importance. In 1861, the arrival of the Pony Express route connected the city directly to the nation's rapidly expanding communication network. And that same pivotal year, the American Civil War began, dramatically reshaping national priorities and military arrangements throughout the Western Territories. Utah's geographic location gained newfound strategic importance during this period, positioned as it was between the eastern states and the Pacific coast, and federal troops were subsequently stationed in the region to protect vital communication routes. In 1862, Camp Douglas was established on the foothills of the Wasatch Mountains, just east of the city, further cementing federal presence in the territory. By 1865, Salt Lake City had been utterly transformed, evolving from an isolated pioneer settlement into a thriving political and economic center of the American West. Its remarkable growth had been built upon organized irrigation, coordinated migration, resourceful local production, and the community's extraordinary ability to adapt to the harsh Great Basin environment. The years from 1847 to 1865 tell far more than just the story of one city's founding. They tell the enduring story of how a small group of determined migrants, facing tremendous odds, built a lasting civilization that would go on to shape the entire future of Utah, turning a remote and forbidding desert valley into one of the American West's most enduring and historically significant settlements.